I am going to read the bio for Ulalume González de León, whose book our features have translated, and they will be telling you lots more about that. Poet Ulalume González de León was born in 1928 in Montevideo, Uruguay, daughter of two poets. She studied literature and philosophy at the Sorbonne and at the University of Mexico. In 1948, Ulalume became a naturalized Mexican citizen. She married painter and architect Teodoro González de León, and they had 3 children. She published essays, stories, poems, and worked with Mexican poet and Nobel laureate Octavio Paz as an editor. She also translated the work of H.D., Elizabeth Bishop, Ted Hughes, Lewis Carroll, and E.E. Cummings. In the 70s in Latin America, González de León was part of a generation of women writers challenging traditional marriage and relationship roles. Her poetry earned her many awards throughout her life, and she died in 2009. So, first poet translator I'm going to introduce is Terry Ehret, who is one of the founders of 16 Rivers Press. Terry has published 4 collections of her own poetry, most recently Night Sky Journey from Kelly's Cove Press. Her literary awards include the National Poetry Series, the California Book Award, the Pablo Neruda Poetry Prize, a nomination for the Northern California Book Reviewers Award, and 5 Pushcart Prize nominations. From 2004 to 2006, Terry served as Poet Laureate of Sonoma County, where she lives and teaches writing. Welcome, Terry. And next is John Johnson. John's poetry has appeared in many print and online journals, including Boxcar Poetry Review, Blade Song, Triggerfish Critical Review, and Web Conjunctions. He's a longtime student of the Spanish language and has studied letterpress printing with Iota Press of Sebastopol, producing chapbooks and bilingual broadsides. And finally, Nancy J. Morales, a first-generation American of Puerto Rican parents, earned her bachelor's degree from Rutgers College, a master's in teaching English as a second language from Adelphi University, and a doctorate in education from Columbia. She has taught at Dominican University, the College of Marin, Sonoma State, and from the elementary to graduate levels. Nancy is a board member for the Northern California chapter of the Fulbright Alumni Association and teaches Spanish to private clients. Please welcome all 3, Terry, John, and Nancy.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that introduction, Sandy. Many of you who are here this evening have been following this project that John and Nancy and I undertook 7 years ago, which is to translate the collected poems of Ulalume González de León from her book Plagios, Plagiarisms. In the preface to this book, Ulalume wrote that there are several orders to the poems. One is chronological. One follows what she calls, quote, the apparent progressive disappearance of the I. And by I mean the pronoun I. Sorry about that. The pronoun I, the conscious awareness of the self rather than the physical I. And the third order is of the progressive affirmation of the I, ironically, often through the words of others. This loss and rediscovery of the self is a theme that runs through the entire collection, though in different ways in each poem and in each section. We chose to bring out the poems from Plagios in 3 volumes, and to some extent the volumes follow these different orders. Tonight we'll be reading in Spanish and English a selection of poems from Volume 1, each exploring that theme of the disappearance of the I. And we'll be giving you a preview of Volume 2, reading poems that take this theme into a new territory. The first poem I'll be reading is Ambos, which means both. In it, the speaker draws us into the world of dreams, where we lose and rediscover our many selves. I'm going to attempt to screen share the poem so you can see it in Spanish while I read it in English. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Yes? All right. Both, the poet speaks. The one who sleeps leaves behind the garden and the house, and the one who dreams recovers them. Night erases night with all the luxury that day at last surrenders. The dream is an endless awakening. It is not the one who sleeps who dreams. It is another, opening his eyes, proposing, creating countless doubles, never meeting himself. What a gallery of mirrors throughout the garden and the house. Now the dream dreams itself. I realize I have not been running the Spanish by you. I apologize for that. The one who dreams wakes from waking and shuts his eyes to the dream. The one who sleeps opens his closed eyes. It's time again for both to meet in me, in truce, both house and garden, less believable. I lived there, walking 2 times awake. Over the garden and the house sings an imaginary bird. I trust myself again. All right, the next 2 short poems are also from volume 1. I'll read each in English, and Nancy will follow reading the Spanish. Punto sobre la I, dot over the I. What's in the glint of a hummingbird, in the shorthand of the sweetheart rose? A meager now, a precious here. The dot God put over the I. But I am in the wind, always somewhere else, scattering God. Not now, not here.
Punto sobre la I. ¿Qué resume el colibrí? ¿Qué abrevia la rosa? How about now? ¿Qué punto sobre la I? ¿Sí? ¿Qué resume el colibrí? ¿Qué abrevia la rosa de Pitimini? Un escaso ahora, un precioso aquí. Dios hecho punto sobre la I. Pero estoy de viento, siempre en otra parte. A Dios diluyendo, ni ahora ni aquí.
All right, the next poem, I'm going to read short poem also from volume 1. It's called falsificación, or forgery. And if you have your copy of Volume 1 and are reading along, it's pages 136 to 137. Forgery. The wind knots and unties reflections, birds and clouds, a garden trembling with broken light, a reflection of never that I forge, stopped, motionless, and alone I revise, trembling with time. Nancy, if you could unmute yourself.
Falsificación. Anuda y desata. El viento, reflejos, pájaros y nubes. Un jardín que tiembla con la luz quebrada. Un nunca reflejo que yo falsificó. Detenida, inmóvil y a solas repaso. Temblando de tiempo.
As I mentioned before, one way that the speaker of these poems disappears is by speaking in the voice and language of others, which is one of the meanings of plagiarism of the book's title. And I think it's also suggested in this poem's title, Forgery. Ulalume wrote in that preface to her book, I do not say what others say, except to speak my own mind better. So while there is this disappearance into the words of others, there is simultaneously an affirmation of the I she speaks of. I'm going to conclude my part of the reading with a poem that for me began my love affair with Ulalume González de León's poetry. It's called En Busca del Cuerpo Perdido, In Search of the Lost Body. I read this and several other poems from Plagios that had been translated by Linda Shear in Michael Benedict's The Prose Poem and International Anthology. This particular poem inspired my own poem, Lost Body, and it was my search for more of Ulalume's poetry that led me to this project and to the unexpected gift of working with my two translation partners, Nancy and John. So in En Busca del Cuerpo Perdido, In Search of the Lost Body, the speaker loses and reclaims the self in the act of love. There are days when we awake with one less arm, when a foot is as remote as if it belonged to an ancestor, or as if it were born in another body. When we turn our backs on our backs, when our eyelids wonder if they are eyelids for opening or closing. Then we lie in wait for the punctual throb with which the blood repeats a name in the bend of an artery, corner with the heart. Before crossing that fortress of danger, that quagmire of names and dreams, or to risk it, armed with the cry with which that name is pronounced. And once the fortress is taken in a love coup, to travel the forgotten provinces, to recover the edge of the ways a body has of being a body, so that elbows and knees might hear and the smile at the nape of the neck appear, and the eyes of the heels break open. So I am going to hand the program now over to Nancy.
Make sure, can everyone hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, thank you. I am just going to continue with our readings from volume 1 today, and I will begin with voces. And if you have the book, I was going to say in la página 24, if you have the book, it's on page 24. And I will read the English first, and then I'll read the Spanish. Voices. Wind and words don't learn their lesson, always digging up shells. Where old affairs make their debut, they plagiarize themselves. Voces. El viento y las palabras no escarmientan, siempre desenterrando caracoles, donde estrenar su viejo asunto. Así mismo se plagia. The next one is viejo y palabras. Old one and words. I can no longer invent the world alone. I'm going to die within myself, with my words. A dry bouquet, not even good for the most insipid tea. Its hieroglyphic sap exhausted. I am old. The proof, I can no longer hurl a word that boomerangs, returning charged with otherness. Viejo y palabras. Ya no puedo inventar el mundo solo. Voy a morirme en mí con mis palabras. Y un ramo seco, ni siquiera bueno para el más chilete, agotado su jugo jeroglífico. Estoy viejo. La prueba, ya no puedo arrojar una palabra boomerang que regrese cargada de otredad. Minuto in page 60 and 61. Minute. Any order, beloved, unrepeatable. Monday, June 4th, for example, 1991. 6:12, let's say. Tea on the balcony. A bird, a kiss, a yellow flower. Words that cloud your beard. My dress, blue wool, fingers that touch at 98.6 degrees. A flash of teeth. Our voices. 6:13, and all that's left is time. No, not time. All that's left are the goodbyes. Goodbye to hours, minutes, days, yours and mine. The sorrow of overlapping goodbyes leaves its crust. Black threads of goodbye are rusting our solar house. I look at you, my friend, through all the minutes. Point of light, I look at you. You will fill my retinas, my time, my sadness, like gazing at a lamp too long. Minuto. Cualquier orden, amado, irrepetible. Lunes 4 de junio, por ejemplo, año 91, 6 y 12, digamos. Té en el balcón, un pájaro, beso, flor amarilla, palabras, esa nube, tus barbas, mi vestido, azul de lana, los dedos que se tocan a 37 grados, relámpago de dientes, nuestras voces, las 6:13, y queda todo el tiempo. No queda todo el tiempo, solo quedan todas las despedidas. Adiós, horas, minutos y días, tuyo míos. Luto de superpuestos adioses, sedimenta su costra, nuestra casa solar van oxidando, adioses hilos negros. Yo te miro, amigo mío, de todos los minutos, punto de luz, te miro, poblarás mis retinas, mi tiempo, mi tristeza, cual lámpara mirada largamente. Y finalmente, los ojos que te ven, finally, los ojos que te ven, which is on page 118 and 119. The eyes that see you. The fan open, looked with 100 eyes, and there at the intersection of all the gazes, the peacock appeared where there was nothing. Los ojos que te ven, abierto el abanico, con 100 ojos miró, y allí en la intersección de todas las miradas el pavo real fue, donde no era nada. What I'd like to say is this project has been incredibly interesting, fascinating, very consuming, challenging, and incredibly rewarding. And I believe that Ulalume is incredibly fascinating as a poet, as a woman, as a poet, as being Latina, as being someone who is incredibly current and very much universal. And I believe her way of speaking and her way of writing introduces, I don't believe we can translate it exactly, because I believe in herself, she's choosing words to reflect or touch upon something she feels, she sees, she's channeling for another, for herself. So it's rather complex and it's not simple. We had a great opportunity to, and I say that because we had a great opportunity to meet her children, at least 2 of her children. And when we shared, you know, our experiences with with her children, and I thought there was going to be some great reveal, and they were like, yeah, you know, and it wasn't like that. And they were wonderful, wonderful people. So I want to qualify that, but they kind of found her work and who she was, like, oh yeah, yeah. So it was kind of underwhelming, you know. It was really surprising because meanwhile we were like, oh my god, and then they were like, yeah, okay. And so I go back to say that, you know, it's very interesting to be on this side of it, meaning in being the translator, and how much of our biases, prejudices, what all those things that make a human inform this piece and inform that translation, that going from one side to the other side. And we're never really on any side, right? Because it's always a work and where your perspective is, how open you are, what does that mean? And the many layers and the many ways of reaching. So my point is that Ulalume is current because she was never in the past. She's current because she was touching and expressing things that she found relevant, and she's very much a human in that sense, because the way she expresses, the way she wrote, the way she has an ability to bring up an emotion and to also create paradox and create layers and express complexities makes her very much current to our human situation, and especially to be in a pandemic, to be in COVID, to be in our country in different, you know, kind of an upheaval of transition, to be in a very unique time in our history. And unique usually implies something positive, but right now for many people, it doesn't necessarily feel positive. So in translating her work, there's many times that, yes, we're here, we did this beautiful thing and it's poetry, but it has been work. So it didn't seem sometimes so easy and so positive. It was work to kind of collaborate and do a project with 2 other people or 3 people, and Ulalume, 4 people. And that is what I chose today, because as Terry was speaking about the versions of I choosing these I's the way that it spoke to me, and what I felt would be appropriate today are voices, minuto, having time, the aspect of time. Los ojos que te ven, eyes that see you. What does that mean? What eyes see you? What is looking out, looking in, and that concept of I, through the physical eye. And viejo y palabras, old in words, because I think as time works with you, or we work with time, that experience and that gravitational pull that we may physically feel in our bodies and express in our bodies has a way of informing how you can feel and how you start to connect even, or not connect, or disconnect, and how her words seem to slowly die within her. You know, she developed Parkinson's. So I believe the ability to watch her own kind of line, or be consciously somewhat aware of it, came to her. And even if she might have been writing about something else, I believe in a personal aspect, that could have been some of the words or emotions channeled or communicated, and how at least we did in this. So thank you. And then last, I'm going to introduce John. So thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for being here. What I'd like to do is present three poems. 2 of them are from the first volume, and 1 of them is from the group of poems that we're working on now. It'll be volume 2 of 3 volumes that we have planned. I'd like to read, but before I go any farther, I wanted to also just recognize Bill Greenwood, who is here tonight too, and just say a special thank you to Bill. Bill was one of our very first readers who gave us some really valuable feedback on our early drafts. So what I'd like to do is read the poem first in English and then in Spanish. The first poem I'd like to read is, it's on page 76, for those of you who have the book. It's Todo dura toda la vida, or Everything Lasts a Lifetime. This poem has these themes that are very familiar for Ulalume, of time and death. And it also has what the writer and the poet, the critic, Victor Manuel Mendiola, said was characteristic of Ulalume's poetry. They are precise and concise. Everything lasts a lifetime. I am world poor, time rich, someone said. If I live on borrowed time, at least the time is mine. They replied, everything, yours or another's, only lasts a lifetime. Todo dura toda la vida. Estoy pobre de mundo, rico de tiempo, dijo. Si vivo de prestado, mi tiempo al menos es mío. Le respondieron, todo, ajeno o tuyo, solo dura toda la vida. The next poem is on page 128, and it is cambios, or changes. And this poem also is precise and concise, and it's about death, and it's about time in the sense of things changing over time. And it's also about an emotion, the emotion of wonderment or awe. And it's a nice example of how Ulalume uses imagery to bring the reader to that emotion. And it also follows her theme of appearance and disappearance in the last two lines of the poem. Changes. The cloud commits suicide, rain. The rain erases itself. It falls, 100 mirrors are born, but it can't see itself in them. The sun ignites the mirrors. From the dead water rises its airy soul. Cloud. Has something changed? Yes. A blue flower that was not there before. A bird's thirst is missing. Cambios. La nube se suicida. Lluvia. La lluvia a sí misma se borra. Cae. 100 espejos nacen y no puede mirarse en ellos. Incendia el sol los espejos. Del agua muerta asciende su alma vaporosa. Nube. ¿Algo ha cambiado? Sí. Hay una flor azul que antes no estaba. Falta la sed de un pájaro. And then the last poem is from the group of poems that Terry and Nancy and I are working on now for Volume 2. And Volume 2 is going to begin with a group of poems that Ulalume titled Muertos, or the dead. And this one is titled Muertos Breves, or Death Briefs. And it's a series of short little what sound a bit like epitaphs, and they're funny mostly and satiric, and they're really good examples, I think, of something else that Mendiola said about that precision and concision in Ulalume's poetry. He said that you can see in that examples of sparkling and mocking and elevated intelligence, and I think you'll see that in these. Death Briefs. Man of numbered days, account closed, story over. Muertos Breves. Hombre de los días contados, la cuenta se acabó el cuento. Here lies one who couldn't take a stand. Aquí descansa uno que no pudo insistir. This one sure kicked the habit. Este sí perdió la costumbre. It's your first death, and how perfect. it's clear you studied. Es tu primera muerte y qué perfecta. Se nota que estudiaste para muerto. Dead poet. He was losing words until he went blank and returned to silence. Poeta muerto. Fue perdiendo palabras hasta quedar en blanco y regresó al silencio. I lost of you only what I didn't imagine, what you were. Solo perdí de ti lo que no imaginaba, lo que eras. And lastly, after Montaigne, did you think you'd never arrive where you've always been going? Según Montaigne, ¿pensabas no llegar a donde ibas sin cesar? If we have a little bit of time, we would be happy to hear comments or respond to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John.